Hi everyone, I'm Katie Posey and I will be reading to you today from Magic for Marigold for the Ellen Montgomery Readathon. I'm very happy to be reading to you today Chapter 7. I usually read to you from Northern California. I'm from Chico, California, which is north of Sacramento. It's very hot there right now, but I am actually out of the country. I've been out of the country since the middle of June. And I hope that those of you that went to the conference on Prince Edward Island had a wonderful time. I wish I could have been there. I have been in Denmark, Germany, Italy, and France, and I just finished attending a conference for Holocaust educators at Yad Vashem, the World Remembrance Center for the Holocaust in Jerusalem, Israel. So I'm actually still in Israel right now, and that's where I am reading to you from today. So because I've been traveling, I don't actually have my print copy of Magic for Marigold. I do have a copy on my Kindle, however, but the next time you see me reading from Magic for Marigold, if you do, you will see me reading from a print copy. Now, Magic for Marigold was one of my favorite Ellen Montgomery books as a young reader. I loved Marigold. I was kind of obsessed with her. I have multiple copies of the book, including the childhood paperback that I had. I was very taken with her as a character, and I wish that there had been more books written about her. When I was 12 or 13, I got involved in this Lucy Maud Montgomery kind of fan club, but those were in the days when we were writing letters by post, and I don't know how I got into this. I think it was through something called Prodigy that we had online, and we all took on characters' names, so everybody chose a character. And when I joined, there were certain number of names that were taken. So, for example, Cordelia and Diana Barry. I actually became Marigold, so the others called me in their letters to me in the correspondence, and I think that we even had this kind of magazine we created. I was known as Marigold, so I always had this identity as Marigold, and maybe I still kind of do today. But anyways, I miss those days, and I don't know where any of those people are, but I remember some of their real names. Like, I remember, okay, this is who Cordelia was. Her real name was Erica, I think. I knew who Diana Barry was. So it was very interesting. But anyways, needless to say, I love this book, and I'm very excited that we're reading it. So I'm going to begin Chapter 7, Lost Laughter 1. Marigold woke up on a Saturday morning in June with stars of delight in her eyes. She thought it the loveliest thing that Sylvia's birthday should be in June. And they were going to have a birthday picnic in the spruce bush by the little spring with its untrampled edges, and a banquet hall with tall spruces for columns, with little frosted cakes, some with M on them and pink icing, and some with S. And one gorgeous big cake with both M and S on it, intertwined with a drift of coconut over everything. Mother had made it specially for Sylvia's birthday. Mother was such a brick. Grandmother now. But Marigold was not going to think of grandmother in her attitude in regard to Sylvia. On this wonderful morning of dawn-rosy meadows and sky-y lures, of white young cherry trees and winds dancing over the hills. Spring is such an exciting time, thought Marigold blissfully as she sprang out of bed and began to dress. Grandmother and Mother had already begun breakfast. Grandmother, very stately and dignified as usual, with silvery hair and sharp steel blue eyes, was looking displeased. She disapproved of this birthday picnic as much as she disapproved of Sylvia. She had so confidently expected that Marigold would get over this Sylvia nonsense when she went to school. But Marigold had been going to school for a year and seemed more besotted on Sylvia than ever. "We'll have to tell her today that you're going to the sanitarium tomorrow," said Grandmother. "Oh, not today," implored Lorraine. "Let her have one more happy day." "Not till the morning." Lorraine had taken a bad cold in March and had hung on. Aunt Marigold said there was nothing serious as yet, but advised a couple of months in the sanitarium. She frightened Grandmother and Lorraine a good deal more than the latter's condition justified, but Aunt Marigold was wise in her day and generation. She knew Lorraine was tired out and run down. She knew she needed a real rest and that she would never get it at Cloud Spruce or visiting among her relatives. And she knew she would never leave Marigold unless she were thoroughly frightened, so Aunt Marigold did it thoroughly. You're going in the afternoon tomorrow. That will give her very little time to get used to it. Oh, but not today, pleaded Mother. Grandmother yielded. You couldn't refuse the request of a woman who was going to the sanitarium next day, even if you did think it remarkably silly. And then Marigold came running in with her little wild rose face all alight and began to eat her porridge out of the dear little blue bowl she loved. Real porridge. Grandmother insisted on that. No imaginary porridges called cereals for Grandmother. Isn't it lovely that Sylvia's birthday is in June, she said, and she's just 8 years old, too. Isn't that extraordinary? Why, it makes us pretty near twins, doesn't it, Mother? We're going to have such an elegant time today. After the picnic, we're going to find that echo that lives way, way back in the hilly land. Don't you go so far away that you can't get back in time for dinner, said Grandmother. You were late last Saturday. Marigold looked rather scornfully at Grandmother. Didn't Grandmother understand that when you went through the magic door, you stepped straight into fairyland, where there was no such thing as time? I think I'll be a little scared to go so far back, said Marigold confidentially to Mother. Marigold never minded admitting she was scared since the day of the dog that now, alas, belonged only to the beautiful far-off past. In the winter, Mr. Plaxton had sold him to a man who lived over the bay. And Marigold, who had once wished he was dead, walked past Mr. Plaxton's door every school morning with an aching lump in her throat, hating Mr. Plaxton and missing woefully that friendly, eager catapult of barks that had always hurled itself over the fence at her. God had answered her prayer after all. Rather late, she thought, very bitterly. I see one has to be careful what one prays for, was her opinion. But Sylvia won't be scared. Sylvia isn't afraid of anything. Why, Marigold cast about for some statement to show how very brave Sylvia was. Why, she'd just as soon call the minister John as not, if she wanted to. You see, telegraphed Grandmother's steel blue eyes, but Mother only laughed. What jam do you want in your tarts, dear? Plum or gooseberry? Marigold liked gooseberry best, but, oh, plum, Mother. Sylvia likes plum. The lunch basket was made up, and Marigold trotted happily into the orchard room and trotted back again. Please, where's the key of the orchard door, she said. It's upstairs on my bureau, said Grandmother. Go out of the side door. Marigold looked reproachfully at Grandmother, wondering if when she got to be over 70 years old, she would be so stupid. You know I have to go through the orchard door, Grandmother. It's a magic door. None of the others are. Run upstairs and get the key for yourself, dear, said Mother gently. Grandmother sniffed, but looked rather pleased. An idea had just come to her. Marigold, happily unconscious of Grandmother's idea, got the key and went through the magic door into the land where wishes come true, which unimaginative people call the old orchard. You went through the orchard and up the stone steps till you came to the green gate, about which grew the 7 slim poplars that always turned into nymphs when she and Sylvia played there. Marigold opened the gate, shut her eyes, said the rhyme, opened them. Yes, there was Sylvia with her floating dark hair and her dreamy eyes, her snow-white hands and feet among the fine, fair shadows of the poplars. Marigold sprang forward with a cry of joy. To think I once thought you were a plum blossom bough, she laughed. 2. Grandmother did not carry out her idea as soon as Mother had gone away. That would have been cruel, and Grandmother was never cruel, intentionally. She must wait until Marigold recovered from the grief of Mother's going. At first, Marigold thought she could never get over it. She was shocked the first day she laughed. She had not expected to be able to laugh again until Mother came home. But Sylvia did say such funny things. And a letter came from Mother every day, such a dear, jolly, understanding letter. Then, Grandmother, please, can I have the key to the magic door? Asked Marigold one morning. Grandmother looked at her with cold eyes. I have locked that door, and it is to remain locked, she said deliberately. I find that I often forget to lock it at night, and that is very dangerous. But Grandmother, exclaimed Marigold, I must have the key. You know I can't see Sylvia unless I go that way. Then you must get along without seeing her, said Grandmother, immovably. Marigold did not plead or coax. She knew quite well that no pleading would avail with Grandmother, who had been one of the stubborn Blaisdells, as Salome said, before she married into the Leslie clan. But she went away with eyes that were stripped of laughter. Grandmother gazed after her triumphantly. This would put an end to all nonsense. It did. Marigold made one effort to find Sylvia. She went out through the hall door, up the orchard, and through the green gate. She shut her eyes, said the rhyme, "Open them." There was no Sylvia. Marigold crept back to the house, a pathetic, defeated little figure. For a week, Marigold moped, so Grandmother termed it. Grandmother was very good to her. She let her help cook, Salome being away on one of her rare vacations, shell lovely walnuts with kinkly meats, seed raisins, sliced citron peel, even, oh bliss of happier days, beat eggs. But Marigold seemed interested in nothing. She sat about a great deal in a big chair on the veranda, looking out on the harbor with a smileless little face. One night, Grandmother discovered that Marigold had gone to bed without saying her prayers. Horrified, Grandmother made Marigold get right up and say them. But when Marigold got into bed again, she looked at Grandmother with sad, defiant eyes. "My soul didn't pray a bit," she said. When another week had passed, Grandmother began to worry about Marigold. All was not well with the child. She was growing thin and pale. "It's the heat," said Grandmother. If it would only get cooler, she would be all right. Grandmother would not even let herself look at the idea that Marigold was fretting for Sylvia. It was absurd to suppose that a child would become ill because of the imaginary loss of an imaginary playmate. She went into Harmony and bought Marigold a magnificent doll, almost as big and beautiful as Alicia. Marigold thanked her, played with it a little, then laid it aside. "Why don't you like your doll?" asked Grandmother severely. "It's a very nice doll," said Marigold listlessly. "But it isn't alive." Sylvia was. It was the first time she had spoken of Sylvia. Grandmother's brow grew dark. "You are a very ungrateful little girl," said Grandmother. Marigold sighed. She was sorry Grandmother thought her ungrateful, but she did not really care very much. When you are horribly tired, you can't care very much about anything. There was no joy in waking up any longer. The bluebells in the orchard had no message for her, and she had forgotten the language of the roses. The days seemed endless, and the nights, the lonely, black, dreadful nights when the windows rattled so terribly and the wind sang and sobbed so lonesomely in the treetops around Cloud of Spruce, worse than endless. There was nothing then but a great, emptying, aching loneliness. No sweet medicine of mother's kisses. No Sylvia, but one night Marigold heard distant music. "I think it is Sylvia singing on the hill," she said, when Grandmother asked her sharply what she was listening to. Grandmother was vexed with herself that she couldn't help recalling that silly old superstition of Salome's that angels sing to children about to die. But Grandmother was really alarmed by now. The child was going to skin and bone. She hadn't laughed for a month. The house seemed haunted by her sad little face. What was to be done? Lorraine must not be worried. Grandmother got Marigold a lovely new dress of silvery silk and a necklace of beautiful pale green beads. Nobody in the whole Leslie clan had such a beautiful necklace. Marigold put it on and thanked Grandmother dutifully and went away and sat on her chair on the veranda. Grandmother gave Marigold her own way about everything, except the one thing that really mattered. But Grandmother did not for a moment suppose that mattered at all, and she certainly wasn't going to give in about a thing that didn't matter. Marigold pined and paled more visibly every day. Grandmother was at her wits' end. "If only Horace's wife was home," she said helplessly. But Uncle Clon and Aunt Marigold were far away at the coast, so Dr. Morehouse was called in, very secretly so that no rumor of it might reach Lorraine. And Dr. Morehouse couldn't find anything wrong with the child. A little run down. The weather was hot. Plenty of sleep, food, and fresh air. He left some pills for her. Marigold took them as obediently for Grandmother as for old Grandmother, but she grew no better. "I'll soon be sleeping in the spare room, won't I, Grandmother?" she said one night. Grandmother's old face grew suddenly older. "The spare room. Don't be foolish, dear," she said very gently. "You are not going to die. You'll soon be all right." "I don't want to be all right," said Marigold. "When I die, I can go through the magic door without any key." Grandmother could not sleep that night. She recalled what Great Aunt Elizabeth had once said of Marigold. "She is too glad to live. Such gladness is not of earth." But then Aunt Elizabeth had always been an old pessimist, always predicting somebody's death. Of course, she hit it once in a while, but not a tenth of her predictions ever came true. There was no need to worry over Marigold. The child had always been perfectly healthy, though not exactly robust, rather too sensitive like Lorraine. The weather was so hot. As soon as it cooled, her appetite would come back. But still, Grandmother could not sleep. She decided that if Marigold did not soon begin to improve, Lorraine would have to be sent for. 3. Dr. Adam Clow, professor of psychology in a famous university, was talking over family folklore with Grandmother on the veranda of Cloud of Spruce, looking out into a blue dimness that was the harbor, but which to him just now was a fair uncharted land where he might find all his lost Aprils. Only the loveliest of muted sounds were heard, the faint whisper of friendly trees, the half-heard, half-felt moan of the surf, the airiest sigh of wind. Down the road, the witching lilt of some invisible musician who was playing a fiddle at Lazar's. And the purr of black cats humped up on the steps, cats who must have been at Cloud of Spruce forever and would be there forever, changeless, ageless creatures that they were. What did the world look like to a cat, speculated Dr. Clow. Know what he might about psychology? He did not know that. Dr. Clow was a very old friend of Grandmother's, and this visit was a great event to her. There was nobody on earth for whose opinion she had such respect as she had for Adam's. He was one of the few people left to call her Marion, to remember her as one of the handsome Blaisdell girls. Adam Clow was that rare thing, a handsome old man having lived a good life so long that he was very full of the beauty of the spirit. His dark eyes were still softly luminous, and his thin, delicately cut, finely wrinkled face rather dreamy and remote. But his smile was vivid and youthful, and his mouth showed strength and tenderness and humor. He came once every year to hear the fir trees whispering on the hills of home. Here, where all his race and all his friends, save Marion Blaisdell, had vanished, here was still home. Here still, on purple evenings and starlit midnights and white dawns, the little waves murmured and sighed on the harbor shore. And of all those who had once listened to them with him was left only Marion Blaisdell, handsome Marion, who had a certain queen's loveliness about her still. With her he could talk about charming, vanished households, and the laughing girls of long ago, and old summers so sweet they could not wholly die. He shuddered when he thought of a recent evening spent with the former schoolmate who prided herself on keeping up with the times and talked to him the whole time about eugenics and chromosomes and the growing menace of the feeble-minded. Dr. Adam Clow thanked his stars for a vine-hung veranda and a woman who had grown old gracefully. "Oh, well, I haven't gotten to wheelchairs and gruel yet," said Grandmother complacently. They talked of the old days and the new days and watched the moon rising over the old fields they knew. And Dr. Clow told her all the jokes he could think of. He was the only person in the world who dared tell jokes to Grandmother. And finally, Grandmother, proud, reserved Grandmother, found herself telling him all about Marigold, who was asleep in her little room with tears still gemming her lashes. She had not taken any interest in Dr. Clow. He was Grandmother's meat, and like Grandmother must long since have forgotten the way to fairyland. Grandmother had to tell somebody. Adam's coming seemed providential. She had always found it easy to tell things to him, always until now. To her amazement, she found it incredibly hard to tell Adam Clow that she had locked the magic door. "She doesn't seem to want to get better," she concluded helplessly. "A wounded spirit who can bear," quoted Adam Clow softly. "I don't understand," said Grandmother in a hurt tone. I think I've been very kind to Marigold." "And I think," said Adam Clow rather sternly, "that she is dying of a broken heart." Grandmother began to say bosh and stopped. One didn't say bosh to doctors of psychology. "You don't really mean to say you think she's got so ill because she can't see that Sylvia of hers anymore, or imagines she can't?" Dr. Clow put his slender fingertips together. "I think I might talk a great deal of wise jargon about a neurosis caused by a suppressed desire for her playmate," he said, "but I won't. I simply advise you to give her the key of the magic door." "But, Adam," Grandmother could not give in so easily, "is it right to encourage her in those pretenses? Those falsehoods? They are not falsehoods. They are truths to her. She sees things invisible to us. She is a queen in the lovely kingdom of make-believe. She is not trying to deceive anybody. She has the wonderful gift of creation in an unusual degree. It is such a pity that she will lose it as she grows older, that she will have to forego its wonder and live, like us, in the light of common day. Has this never occurred to you, Marion? No, it hadn't. But Grandmother gave a little sigh of surrender. Dr. Klaus stood up. I must be going. We have sat up terribly late for old folks. I'm sorry you have to walk to Harmony, said Grandmother. Our horse is too lame to drive just now, and Horace is away, so his car. I don't like a car after dark. In a car you can never feel the charm of the soft enfolding night. I want to walk. It keeps me limber. Well, it's goodbye for another year. I must go back tomorrow and begin work. And if I have to slip off this robe of flesh before next summer, I'll save up my jokes to tell you in eternity. After all, there's nothing quite so satisfying as an old friendship, is there, Marion? As for Marigold, the earth has grown very old for us, Marion. Let us be thankful it is still young and full of magic for Marigold. 4. The next morning after breakfast, Grandmother silently laid the key of the orchard door by Marigold's blue bowl. Marigold lifted incredulous eyes. Oh, Grandmother, may I? May I? Yes, said Grandmother curtly. In spite of Adam's fine phrases, she did not relish defeat by this puss of a Marigold. And there was Lucifer cocking an insolent yellow eye at her, as if he were hugely amused over the whole affair. Marigold stood still for a moment, transfigured. Her face was as blithe as the day. It was as if a little shower of joy had rained down upon her out of the sky. She flew through the orchard room, through the magic door, through the blue-eyed grass of the orchard, as if there were some Atalanta wizardry in her feet, through the green gate. For another moment she stood, almost afraid. Suppose Sylvia? Then she shut her eyes and said her rhyme. 5. Grandmother stood in the magic door at twilight. There was a pale moon glow behind the cloud of spruce. There was a dance of great plummy boughs in the western wind. And there was a sound not heard in the orchard for a long time, the sound of Marigold's laughter as she waved goodnight to Sylvia over the green gate.